and a warm welcome. You're joining us here at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. And tonight we will be talking about the role Japan has played in Sri Lanka's economic crisis and continue to play in the revival and resurrection of the Sri Lankan economy. I've invited to our studios none other than the Ambassador of Japan here in Sri Lanka, His Excellency, the Japanese Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Mizukoshi Hideaki. A very warm welcome to you and Ayubowan.
Ayubowan, thank you for having me tonight.
Ambassador, I think we discussed today about Japan's support to Sri Lanka and future support going forward. And this also comes almost 2 weeks after the visit of Japanese Finance Minister to Sri Lanka. Shunichi Suzuki, who was in Sri Lanka, met the President, made several comments on Sri Lanka's recovery. Maybe let's start off talking about Japan-Sri Lanka relations and where we are today from where we started.
Well, actually, we have a very good relationship since our independence. I mean, from Japan's independence from the occupation by the Allied forces in 1951. The origin of that good relationship is the San Francisco Peace Conference. Former President AdaDerana, at the time the Minister of Finance, was participating in that conference, and he made a very famous speech at the time, quoting Lord Buddha's sacred scripture that goes, "Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love." By quoting that word, he has made a case for early independence of Japan, free from the occupation. And those words and acts have very much encouraged Japanese people at the time. And responding to the debt of gratitude, Japan has been supporting Sri Lanka's development through various economic cooperation from that time.
So Japan has remembered those words and continue to be grateful for Sri Lanka's efforts. Late President J.R. Jayawardana's intervention at the famous and most important San Francisco Peace Conference on behalf of Japan. Sri Lanka plunged into an economic crisis, the most difficult in Sri Lanka's history. Japan has intervened in creditor conferences, bringing together creditors, and now Sri Lanka has made much progress in terms of debt restructuring, or at least a principle agreement with the creditors. Tell us where this is going and how Japan will support Sri Lanka in terms of the debt restructuring process.
Okay, let me explain first about Japan's support towards Sri Lanka's economic crisis. We have supported in Sri Lanka in 2 ways. One is during the economic crisis, at the worst time of economic crisis, Japan has contributed in our humanitarian assistance, for example, in providing medicines and food for the most vulnerable people. That is one thing. The other support is supporting Sri Lanka in its effort for negotiating debt restructuring. The debt restructuring of Sri Lanka was seen very difficult because traditionally the debt restructuring negotiation has been dealt by Paris Club. But in Paris Club, two important creditors don't belong to Paris Club, that are China and India. So at the start of this debt restructuring, there was no platform for negotiating the debt restructuring, including those two big creditors. And as for low-income countries, there is a G20 common framework which address debt issues. But Sri Lanka is not low-income countries. So that's why there was no platform. So Japan took a leadership in creating a platform for negotiating debt restructuring of Sri Lanka. That is official creditors committee. It was launched in April last year, and Japan has been the major coordinator in that platform. And in November last year, 6 months after the inception of the official creditors committee, agreement in principle on debt restructuring was reached. So that is a great progress, and because of that, Sri Lanka was able to get approval of the IMF first review. So that has given a lot of support for solving this problem of debt restructuring.
Certainly, Ambassador, I think Japan, with the finance minister of Japan, Suzuki's
Yes.
visit on the 12th of January, it was reiterated that Japan will play a leading role in Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process and resolving this process. We heard about the creditor agreement with the creditors that was reached in principle.
Yes.
When do we expect a more concrete agreement made, and what will the process be beyond that?
Yes. So there has already been this agreement in principle, but it needs to be formalized by a Memorandum of Understanding. I think the relevant officials even now negotiating very with a lot of efforts for completion of this document. I think, well, it can be agreed anytime. I think it will not be long before reaching agreement. And that will bring further progress in the debt restructuring process.
What remains to be done in that formalization of that agreement?
Well, I think the technical details must be agreed. So
is that,
and also there must be agreement both with this official creditors committee and also between Sri Lanka and Chinese Exim Bank. I think that has to also be formalized.
do you see any challenges here when Sri Lanka is dealing with any of the external creditors, or even bilaterally? Do you see any challenges that Sri Lanka has to overcome?
I think Sri Lanka has been doing a very good job agreeing with the IMF, making agreement and achieving the conditions set by IMF. I think that is very important. Creditor countries agreeing on debt restructuring. That means debt restructuring means easing burden of debt. And we are trusting this Sri Lanka's agreement with IMF. And that is very important for this debt restructuring to make progress.
If you can share with us what the nature of this agreement is going to be, or what the conditions for Sri Lanka will be. What do all the countries, what are you agreeing with Sri Lanka for?
So the creditors are now trying to agree on easing of the burden of debt. But it must be in substantially in equal terms with all creditors. So on one hand, Sri Lanka has agreed with the economic reforms with IMF. So based on the understanding that Sri Lanka will achieve that goals, creditors are easing burden of the debt to Sri Lanka, thereby giving more space for Sri Lanka for the economic development in future.
That's wonderful, and I think everyone's wondering what debt restructuring really is, and of course economists in Sri Lanka, academics, and even Sri Lankan authorities have been trying to explain the process, but it's for the first time we are hearing from Japan, who has been at the center, if not playing the most leading role in bringing these countries together to help Sri Lanka overcome the debt crisis. So is this going to be a moratorium or easing of debt interest? What is the nature of it?
There are several ways in easing the debt, but I think it's still in negotiation, and it's not made public until the completion of all the agreements. So I am not in a position to, explain the details. But the objective is easing the burden of debt.
So while the organization of the Creditor Committee meets and discusses to formalize this process, let's talk about the bilateral agreements and relations that Japan and Sri Lanka have.
Yes.
The projects that Japan supported Sri Lanka or were in agreement to support Sri Lanka came into question in recent times with Sri Lanka's cancellation of especially the LRT project. And in recent times we saw Japan talking about the recovery of costs incurred in because of the termination of LRT project or the feasibility conducted. Can you explain to us, Ambassador, what stage this project is now? Is there any discussion to resume it, or are we looking at still sticking to the plans of recovering costs?
It's true that this LRT project was cancelled unilaterally with very with reasons not very persuasive, and it's very regrettable. And but since President Wickremesinghe came office, now Sri Lankan government is kind of apologizing the cancellations which has took place, and they are now requesting to start it again. And well, we are of course we have heard their request, and it's noted. But it's still too early to make a decision, because Sri Lanka is now still in the middle of the restructuring. And there are also JICA projects which are now suspended because Sri Lanka is in default situation. So when this debt restructuring negotiation is completed, the first thing that we are intending to do is to resume the suspended projects, which is also very important. And suspended projects include like Bandaranaike International Airport project. And this time, when Minister of Finance came to Sri Lanka, he has visited the Bandaranaike International Airport. And he saw the situation, and he has understood now the tourists to Sri Lanka is expanding very rapidly. And he has understood the need to resume such project for the early development of early recovery of Sri Lankan economy. So I think those which have been were already ongoing and suspended, I think they are the ones that Japan will tackle first. And after that, we will consider new projects which are being requested.
Ambassador, when you say there is some consideration for the resumption of these projects, I think the President and the government too have indicated that there is focus on recommencing strategic projects that were halted because of the economic crisis. In Sri Lanka, we're talking about why the LRT project is important for Sri Lanka. While commenting on the resumption of such projects, the Finance Minister of Japan, Shunichi Suzuki, I think also focused on these projects. Tell us more about the visit and what really prompted this visit this time.
I think because Japan was so much involved in supporting this debt restructuring negotiation, Finance Minister who is responsible for all these negotiations wanted to visit Sri Lanka and see the situation with his own eyes. And he was very much impressed by the ongoing reforms by Sri Lanka. In his meeting with the president, he has commended Sri Lanka for making improvements in economic indicators such as GDP. The GDP of Sri Lanka turned plus in the third quarter of 2023. And Sri Lanka has made a lot of improvement in inflation. I think from 2021 to 2020, it was almost 80%. But last 1 year, it was a single digit, and perhaps even under 5%. And that was much better than perhaps expected. So the finance minister was very much impressed with that. And I think he has a recognition that Sri Lanka is achieving the objective that it has agreed with IMF.
What are the prospects of resuming yen loans now that there is progress being made?
So that's a very big step for the resumption of yen loans. So we are waiting for this MOU to be completed. So Japan is a part of that negotiation in the MOU. So we are also supporting Sri Lanka to make that happen early. Yes.
I think Japan has provided about $96 million worth of assistance to Sri Lanka since 2022. So apart from the support in terms of debt restructuring, what kind of assistance are we going to look at in the development of bilateral relations, Ambassador, especially when Sri Lanka is looking at developing industries, improving exports, and ICT development and other industries. How do we look at improving this bilateral assistance?
Yes. Not only official development assistance by the government of Japan. I think private investment will be a key for the future of Sri Lanka. So we are, well, now I think the first step for that is stabilization of Sri Lankan economy. And then we are hoping that the reforms that Sri Lanka is making in accordance with IMF will lead to a better business environment. For example, transparency of tax collection, customs, and all the government procedures. For Japanese companies, untransparent procedures, or you can say problems of corruption, is a big obstacle for investment in Sri Lanka. So this financial crisis is, I think, a good opportunity for Sri Lanka to make improvements in those areas. So we are encouraging those reforms, and we would like to, we are ready to give technical assistance. We are now assisting reforms like reform of the Ceylon Electric Board, reforms of the judiciary system, etc. So we would like to enhance cooperation in those areas as well. And when we do assist Sri Lanka in those areas, we are thinking of creating better environment for Japanese companies so that more Japanese businesses will come to Sri Lanka.
I'd like to speak more about that, but when we come back after this short break here at Hyde Park, we are in conversation with the Japanese ambassador in Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mizukoshi Hideaki. We're in conversation with the Japanese ambassador in Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mizukoshi Hideaki, about the level of cooperation and support Japan has extended to Sri Lanka in overcoming the crisis and what more can be done in Sri Lanka's recovery process. Ambassador, you were talking about the kind of support and what Japan expects Sri Lanka to do in improving investments in the country. Is there any progress Sri Lanka has made in terms of ease of doing business? Or you mentioned about transparency and improving other fundamentals. Does Sri Lanka have any challenges to overcome in achieving those? And secondly, to the same question, do we see any Japanese investments coming to Sri Lanka in the near future?
Well, on the improvements that Sri Lanka is making, I think a series of legislation that are submitted to Parliament by the government for the reforms of government procedures, etc. I think they are now in looking to a right direction. I think the challenge is implementation. So we are watching if those reform efforts will be realized, and I think Japanese business people are also watching that as well. As for the Japanese investments, well, Japanese investors are often very cautious, so they are not very quick to decide, to make decisions. So I think they are watching now. But one thing that I can say is that perhaps since I think recently there are more and more business people who are visiting Sri Lanka from Japan to see the situation. So they are still now watching, observing the situation, and still not at the stage of making decisions for investment. But there are some Japanese business people are certainly interested in the future of Sri Lanka.
What would you tell them? You're here in Sri Lanka. You've seen Sri Lanka's turbulent times. You were posted in Sri Lanka as the diplomat here in November 2021. And I think you've seen the crisis. You've seen what Sri Lanka has gone through.
Yes.
What will you share with your fellow citizens?
Well, as ambassador to Sri Lanka, I would like to promote more business cooperation between Japan and Sri Lanka. So, but very often, Japanese media only report, downside of Sri Lanka only. So I try to give them explanations on the good side of Sri Lanka and about the reforms that the current government is making and potential of Sri Lanka. And whenever there are important guests from Japan, I will take them to Colombo port, and we go up to the control tower of the Colombo port, and we see all the terminals, and I will explain those guests how important Sri Lanka is as a hub in the Indian Ocean. So, and people are impressed, usually. So, I think it's Sri Lanka is geographically placed in a very strategic position, and to expand business in the Indian Ocean area. I think Sri Lanka is one of the key countries. So that is what the message that I'm trying to convey to Japanese business people.
What I understand is that you're not just the ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka, but you're being the Sri Lankan ambassador you're being an ambassador for Sri Lanka, promoting Sri Lanka's good and positivity among the Japanese. These past 3 years, tell us about your experience here in our beautiful island.
Well, I have traveled very much in Sri Lanka from south to north, and I have seen different cultures in the island, and beautiful sceneries, and I'm quite enjoying it. Yes.
That's wonderful. I have a few more questions. I'm told we have a little time, but let me try to cover them all. I think Japan's work with Sri Lanka in terms of improving connectivity, we touched upon that, especially the LRT project and other projects. Can we just maybe see if there are any projects in the pipeline that we can focus on resumption if the Japanese investors or companies are happy with the development Sri Lanka is making, and once Sri Lanka's investment climate is supportive of the kind of investments they're planning to bring to Sri Lanka?
Well, those there are ongoing projects like Grid Line project, for example, and what else? Apart from end-on projects, we have projects like empowering women, or projects which will support development of conflict-affected areas like Northern Province, Eastern Province, like clearing mines, for example. So there are many projects. And also, one of the ways for cooperation to Sri Lanka is dispatching young volunteers for supporting Sri Lankan people. And we are now increasing the number of those volunteers, which has diminished during the COVID period. Yeah.
The digitalization of Sri Lanka's terrestrial television, Japan has been Sri Lanka's partner in this process. What kind of progress has been made? We've been talking about it for many years now.
Yes. So that is a project for the digital TV broadcasting. So it has been already agreed between Sri Lanka and Japan, but with this default of Sri Lanka, now it has been suspended like other projects. The objective of this project is to provide better quality of the television programs, and also it can also improve the digitalization of Sri Lanka as well. I think with that project, Sri Lanka will have more spaces for using the internet. So that will contribute greatly to the digitalization of Sri Lanka.
Japan has been Sri Lanka's development partner for decades.
Yes.
But in recent times, we are also seeing the power play that's affecting Sri Lanka, especially with the strategic location. We have our closest neighbor, India, who has made a steadfast development, and then we have China, who has been investing in development in Sri Lanka's roads and highways, and the United States especially. With the kind of the tug-of-war, regional power play, and superpowers' involvement. What is Japan's stance when it comes to Sri Lanka's foreign policy and how Sri Lanka is dealing with these nations?
Well, Japan is now promoting a policy that we call free and open Indo-Pacific. That is to secure free space in the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, where there is democracy and rule of law. And I think we, from that perspective, we would like to, Sri Lanka to develop as a free, democratic, prosperous, and independent nation. That is exactly what Sri Lanka proposed at San Francisco conference, Japan to be. Like, Sri Lanka contributed for independent and free Japan. We would also like to support Sri Lanka's development as an independent, democratic, and prosperous nation.
That's wonderful, and I think we can also touch upon expanding Sri Lanka-Japan trade relations going forward. What is the potential here, Ambassador? Now,
I think the main products from Sri Lanka to Japan to export, like tea and some textile products. And from Japan to Sri Lanka, it's like automobiles. But at this moment, it's restricted because of the foreign currency problem. I hope there will be more Japanese companies in future which can produce products that can be exported to Japan. I can't say which at this moment. And also, it's not trade, but I think there is much more potential for tourism from Japan to Sri Lanka. Those who have visited Sri Lanka from Japan all like it very much, but still it's not very known to Japan as a tourist destination. So we would like to make a promotion.
So what more can Sri Lanka do to promote Sri Lanka? You have been in Sri Lanka. How do you like the food? What are your favorite food? Maybe we can promote that among your fellow citizens.
Yes, Sri Lankan curry is very, very, very tasteful, and a lot of Japanese people like it. Yes. Yes, and the fruits also very, very good.
The tropical fruits in Sri Lanka. I think we can learn from you how we should promote Sri Lanka there in Japan. I think we are in the final few minutes of the program. Do you have a message for Sri Lanka before we wrap up the program?
I think since the time of financial crisis, I think Sri Lanka made a very good progress improving the economic situation. There are more challenges, I think, for Sri Lanka, but we would like to continue to support Sri Lanka to develop, and we hope that we'll have an even deeper relationship between Japan and Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your time here at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. It was indeed a pleasure speaking with you tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We had with us the Japanese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Mizukoshi Hideaki, joining us here at Hyde Park to talk about Sri Lanka-Japan relations, how Japan has been supporting Sri Lanka through the economic crisis, and the future potential and the process for developing bilateral ties. We'll see you again next week with yet another discussion. Thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.